I once thought buying my first house was proof of my hard work. I opened its doors to my parents, hoping to create a true home. But then one night, as I was fixing the security cameras I thought were just for preventing theft, the screen lit up and revealed a horrifying secret. A secret shocking enough to make my blood run cold and to make me realize the danger that could destroy me wasn't in the mines. It was my own flesh and blood. Hello, my name is Lorenzo Carver. I'm 30 years old, living in a quiet small town in Pennsylvania, where lush green hills embrace winding roads and old red brick houses. I'm a mining engineer, my work taking me through dark tunnels where coal dust clings to my skin and sweat soaks my clothes. No one in my family ever thought I'd amount to anything, but I did. I bought a house, a real home, through my own sweat and perseverance. It's the thing I'm most proud of, even though no one in my family ever patted my shoulder or offered a word of praise. I'm not the type to talk much about myself, maybe because I grew up in a family where kind words were as rare as sunlight in a Pennsylvania winter. My father, Raphael, is a man in his 50s, his weathered face etched with deep lines as if carved by his own bitterness. He's the kind of person who always makes you feel small, no matter how hard you try. Lorenzo, what have you ever done besides burying yourself in those filthy mines? He'd say with a mocking smirk I've known since childhood. I never responded, not because I was afraid, but because I knew words were useless. My mother, Maria, is different. She has a gentle appearance, her voice soft as if wrapped in silk. But that gentleness is just a facade. Beneath it, she's cold and biased to a degree that has left my heart bleeding more times than I can count. In her eyes, I was never truly her son. The one she was proud of, the one she embraced and cherished, was Diego, my younger brother. At 27, he has a handsome face and a smile that easily wins people over. His life revolves around parties and empty promises. Diego once called me the extra in the family right in front of our parents, and they just laughed as if it were a harmless joke. I'm not one to hold grudges. I learned to live with those wounds, tucking them away in a hidden corner of my soul and moving forward. I became independent, hardworking, and saved every penny. Every paycheck from those long shifts in the mines I carefully set aside. I didn't dream of luxuries, just a house, a place I could call my own, where I could breathe without feeling weighed down by contemptuous glances. And after years of effort, I did it. My house sits at the end of Cedar Lane, a 2-story home with large windows and a small garden out back. When I held the keys for the first time, I stood at the front door watching sunlight stream through the glass and felt a lightness in my chest. Finally, I had a place that belonged to me. But what truly made me happy wasn't just the house. It was Isabella. She came into my life like a cool breeze, dispelling the chill left by my family. Isabella is beautiful, with wavy brown hair and eyes that sparkle like they hold the entire sky. She's charming, always knowing how to make me laugh, no matter how bad my day was. When I'm with her, I feel seen, valued, something I never got from my family. We're engaged, and our wedding is approaching. I thought that after years of being treated as an outsider, I had finally found happiness. But life, as I learned from years of silent endurance, never lets you stay at peace for too long. The sense of calm I had found in my new home, with its sunlit windows and the small garden filled with Isabella's daisies, suddenly felt fragile when I received a call from my father. His voice on the phone was dry, devoid of warmth, more like a command than a conversation. "Lorenzo, your mother and I need to stay at your place for a while. The house is having plumbing issues. It's unlivable. Get things ready. We'll come by this weekend." I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, feeling the air in the room grow heavier. Plumbing issues? The excuse sounded plausible, but something felt off. Growing up, my parents only called when they needed something from me. Fix this, pay for that, or just to remind me I'd never measure up to Diego, my younger brother. Now, when I had just bought my new house, something I hadn't even bragged about to them, they suddenly wanted to move in. I never told them about this house, so how did they know? I wanted to refuse, to say I needed my own space, that I was getting married soon and busy with preparations. But as always, the weight of duty pressed on my chest. I was the eldest son. No matter how they treated me, I still owed them for raising me. Maybe, I told myself, this was a chance to mend things. Maybe after years of distance, they wanted to be closer to me. I took a deep breath, suppressing the unease rising within me. "All right," I said, my voice flat. "I'll get things ready." Hanging up, I sank onto the sofa, my gaze drifting out the window. The sunset was casting a golden glow over Cedar Lane. I thought of Isabella, her smile, and told myself everything would be fine. It was only a few weeks. They'd leave and I'd have my space again. But that nagging bad feeling, like a small thorn pricking my heart, wouldn't go away. The day they arrived, a light rain was falling. I stood at the door watching my father's old pickup truck pull up. Raphael stepped out first, tall and gaunt, his weathered face expressionless. He scanned the house, his eyes gliding over the clean brick walls and large windows, then snorted. "Must have borrowed money from everywhere to afford this place, huh, Lorenzo?" he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I bit my lip, saying nothing. His words hit like a punch, but I was used to it. I just nodded, opening the door wider to let them in. Maria followed, a silk scarf draped over her shoulders, her smile as gentle as ever. But I knew that smile wasn't for me. "Nice house, Lorenzo," she said, her voice soft but cold. "Though I think you should have saved more instead of showing off like this." I forced a smile, swallowing the irritation. Saved more? I had scrimped every penny to buy this house, while she never once asked how I was living or working. Diego visited the next day. He strode in with his trendy outfit and smug smile, tossing his bag onto the sofa and sprawling out, flipping on the TV without asking. "Yo, Lorenzo, grab me a beer," he said, eyes glued to the screen. I stood there, my hands clenched, feeling like a servant in the house I had poured my sweat into building. But I said nothing, just went to the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and set it on the table in front of him. He didn't even say thank you, just smirked, as if it was only natural for me to serve him. Isabella arrived that afternoon, bringing a bottle of wine and her radiant smile. She hugged me, whispering, "It'll be okay, love." I nodded, feeling a wave of relief with her by my side. Isabella always knew how to soothe me, making everything feel lighter. She greeted my parents and Diego with perfect warmth, but when she looked at me, I caught a fleeting glint in her eyes. Something tense, something puzzled. I brushed it off, thinking I was being overly sensitive. Maybe she was just nervous about my family showing up so suddenly. The atmosphere in the house over the next few days was truly awkward. My father, Raphael, moved through the house like a king, always finding something to criticize. "This floor's too slippery, Lorenzo." "Couldn't you have picked better wood?" he said, though I had chosen the best wood I could afford. My mother, Maria, maintained her gentle facade, but every word she spoke seemed to subtly remind me I was never good enough. "Diego probably wouldn't like living in a house like this," she said once at the dinner table. "He prefers more modern things." I just nodded, swallowing the bitterness. Diego kept coming over, acting as if I were the outsider in my own home. He took over the living room when he visited, leaving his shoes scattered, abandoning dirty dishes for me to clean. "Lorenzo, why are you so slow? Clear the table, I'm watching a movie," he said during one visit, his tone commanding. I tried to stay patient, telling myself it was only a few more weeks until my parents left, and Diego would have no reason to come by so often. But each time he showed up, the irritation inside me grew, like an overinflated balloon ready to burst. Then one evening, as I checked the home security cameras, a system I'd installed for peace of mind, I noticed something odd. The feeds from the living room and kitchen were pitch black, showing nothing. I frowned, checking the wiring, thinking it might be a technical glitch. I had set up the system when I moved in, and it had always worked perfectly. "Probably just a loose cable," I muttered, trying to reassure myself. I mentioned it at dinner that night with Diego there as well. The cameras in the living room and kitchen are down, I said. Everyone, please lock the doors carefully when coming and going. I'll fix them when I have time. Rafael, cutting into his steak, looked up, a strange glint in his eyes. Down? No need to fix them, he said slowly, his tone laced with something unspoken. The house is full of people now. We're not going anywhere. What's there to worry about theft? Diego and my mother exchanged a glance, their lips curling into faint half-smiles. Isabella, sitting beside me, placed a hand on my shoulder, smiling gently. He's right. Don't worry too much. We're all here. I nodded, forcing a smile, but a strange unease began to stir inside me. I looked around the dining table at my parents, my brother, and even the woman I loved, and suddenly I felt like prey in my own home. The days that followed, that feeling grew stronger, like a silent storm gathering momentum. I started noticing small details, the way my mother always changed the subject whenever I asked about the plumbing repairs at their house. The way Diego, though only visiting, showed up at odd hours, often late at night, as if checking on something. And even Isabella, she was still sweet, still held my hand, but sometimes I caught her staring out the window, her eyes distant as if hiding something. I decided I had to do something. If the security cameras were malfunctioning, I would fix them. Not because I feared theft, but because I needed answers. I needed to know why my heart kept sounding alarms, why everything in this house, my supposed sanctuary, now felt suffocating. I didn't tell anyone about my plan, not even Isabella. In the small corner of the basement where I kept my tools, I checked the camera system. As I pried open the control unit, my heart pounded. Several wires had been disconnected, not by accident but deliberately. The ends were cut precisely as if someone had intentionally disabled it. This wasn't a technical glitch. Someone in this house didn't want to be recorded. I sat there in the dim light of the basement, my hands trembling as I held the wires. Who had done this? Rafael? Maria? Diego? I didn't know, and I didn't have an answer. After fixing the cameras, I quickly restored the system. I reconnected the wires, tested the signal, and when the green light on the monitor flickered back to life, I felt a flicker of relief. But I didn't stop there. I installed a backup storage device hidden in a secluded corner of the basement and set it to send all data directly to a private cloud account only I could access. If something was happening in this house, I would find out. I needed the truth, no matter how painful. One late evening, as rain pattered outside and the house fell silent, I sat in my small study, the door locked tight. I opened my laptop, accessed the cloud account, and began reviewing the camera footage. I didn't know what I was looking for, maybe just reassurance or a sign to dispel my unease, but what I saw made my blood run cold. The footage started from the previous night in the living room after I had gone to bed. Rafael, Maria, Diego, and Isabella. They sat around the coffee table, their voices hushed, their faces tense. I turned up the volume, my heart pounding as if it might burst from my chest. Rafael spoke first, his voice low and sharp. Lorenzo's not our blood. We've raised him long enough. I stopped breathing as if someone had punched me square in the face. Not their blood. I was adopted. The years of scorn, of being treated as an outsider, the mocking words. It all suddenly made sense, like a puzzle snapping into place. But that wasn't the worst of it. Diego, sitting beside Isabella, draped an arm around her shoulder with unsettling familiarity, a smug smile on his lips. "You're brilliant, Isabella," he said, his voice dripping with delight. "Lorenzo's completely fallen into the trap. Just hold on a few more weeks and everything will be ours." Isabella smiled, but it wasn't the gentle smile I loved. It was cold, calculating. My heart felt like it was being crushed. Maria, with her feigned gentleness, spoke up. "Thank you, Isabella. Thanks to you, we've already gotten a good chunk of money from Lorenzo. That story about your father needing money for kidney treatment was a stroke of genius." I gripped the edge of the desk, my nails digging into the wood. Kidney treatment? Money? I had given Isabella thousands of dollars, believing I was helping her father, the man I was about to call my father-in-law. Was it all a lie? And then the most horrifying part came. Diego lowered his voice, almost whispering, "At the upcoming party, just slip some antifreeze into his drink and it's done. It'll look like an accident. No one will suspect a thing." Rafael nodded, his eyes devoid of hesitation. Maria smiled as if it were a flawless plan. "Isabella?" She just nodded, saying nothing. But her silence was more terrifying than any words. I turned off the video, my breathing rapid, my chest aching as if it had been torn apart. Everything in my life, family, love, trust, crumbled in just a few minutes. I sat there in the darkness, tears silently streaming down my face. Not because I was weak, but because I realized I had been living a lie for too long. The years I spent trying to be loved, to be acknowledged, now revealed as a cruel charade. I wasn't Rafael and Maria's biological son. Isabella, the woman I loved more than anything, was a traitor. And their plan, antifreeze in my drink, wasn't just about stealing my property. It was about taking my life. I gripped the edge of the desk, my nails digging into the wood as if that was the only way to keep myself from collapsing. Memories flooded back like violent waves crashing against rocks. I remembered childhood evenings, sitting at the corner of the dinner table, watching my family laugh and chatter. "Lorenzo, you don't look like anyone in this family," Diego once said, a mocking smile on his lips. I had thought it was just a teasing jab from a mischievous younger brother, but now I understood. It wasn't a joke, it was the truth they had hidden from me all these years. Rafael's cold stares, Maria's favoritism. It all had a reason. I wasn't their blood. I was just the kid raised in their house, as my mother once said in a sneering remark. But what hurt most wasn't the truth about my lineage. It was Isabella. The image of her sitting next to Diego, her cold smile as he draped an arm around her, was a fatal blow. I had trusted her. I had opened my heart, placed it in her hands, believing she was the light that banished the darkness of my past. I remembered the time she held my hand, whispering that she loved this house, loved me. All lies. Every sweet word, every gentle smile was part of a plan to siphon money from me, to lure me into a deadly trap. I had believed I was doing the right thing, but I was just a foolish prey. I wiped my tears, my breathing slowly steadying, though my chest still felt crushed. Part of me wanted to run downstairs, confront Rafael and Maria right then and there, scream at them, demand answers. I wanted to call Isabella, question her, ask how she could look into my eyes and lie. But amidst the rage and despair, a small voice in my head spoke. "Stay calm, Lorenzo. If you act now, you'll lose everything." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to sit up straight. I was no longer the 15-year-old boy clutching a fork to hold back tears. I was no longer the son craving his family's love. I was a man, and I had to protect myself. I reopened the laptop, backed up the entire video to a separate hard drive, and checked the cloud account to ensure everything was secure. Those images, Rafael's voice, Diego's smile, Isabella's complicit silence, were my evidence, my weapon. I wouldn't let them know I had uncovered the truth. If I tipped them off, they'd deny it, destroy the evidence, and I'd lose my chance. I had to be smarter, more patient, even if it meant living with people plotting to kill me. The next morning, I went downstairs to the kitchen, trying to act normal. Maria was brewing coffee, the familiar aroma filling the air, but now it only made me feel suffocated. "Morning, Mom," I said, my voice even, forcing a smile. She turned, giving me that gentle smile I had once craved but now saw as fake. "Morning, dear. Sleep well?" she asked, as if nothing was amiss. I nodded, pouring coffee into a mug, trying not to let my hands tremble. Rafael walked in, his gaze sweeping over me as usual, cold and contemptuous. "Heading to work early today, Lorenzo?" he asked, his tone laced with something unspoken. I nodded, keeping my response brief, afraid that if I spoke too long, the rage inside me would spill out. Isabella came over that evening carrying a bouquet of daisies. the flowers she knew I loved. "To brighten our home," she said, her smile as radiant as sunlight. I looked into her eyes, searching for even a hint of sincerity, but all I saw was deception. I hugged her, whispering, "Thank you," but inside it felt like I was embracing a stranger. I talked about the wedding, about the plans we had made, as if everything was normal. "I want everything to be perfect for you," I said, and she nodded, her eyes sparkling. But I knew that sparkle wasn't for me. After she left, I drove to the office of a trusted lawyer, Mr. James, who had helped me with the house purchase contract. I told him everything from the video to the plot involving my family and Isabella. I showed him a copy of the footage and his face hardened. "Lorenzo, this is serious," he said, his voice grave. "But if you confront them now, they'll deny it, claim it's a misunderstanding, or destroy the evidence. You need to wait. Let them act, and then your evidence will be undeniable." I nodded, though my heart pounded with fear and anger. Waiting meant I had to keep living with people who wanted me dead, smiling at them, pretending I knew nothing. But Mr. James was right. I needed stronger evidence, not just their words on video, but concrete actions. I went home telling myself I could do this. I was no longer the boy yearning for love. I was Lorenzo Carver, and I would protect my life at all costs. In the days that followed, I lived like an actor on a stage. I smiled at Maria, chatted with Raphael, and hugged Isabella as if nothing had changed. I talked about the wedding, the future, dreams I knew would never come true. Every smile, every word from me was a mask, hiding the fire burning in my heart. Each morning, I woke up feeling like I was stepping into an invisible battlefield. My house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a war zone. Raphael and Maria started talking about a party. "To celebrate your upcoming wedding," Maria said, her voice soft as silk, but I knew it was a facade for their deceit. "We should do something special, Lorenzo. A small party, just family." Raphael nodded, and for the first time I saw him smile at me. A smile devoid of warmth, as if he were playing a role in his own drama. "Good idea," he said. "You deserve a celebration, Lorenzo." His words sent a chill down my spine. I knew this wasn't a party to bless me. This was the trap they had discussed in the video, the trap to end me. Isabella, upon hearing about the party, clapped her hands with excitement. "Oh, love, that's wonderful," she said, hugging me, her wavy brown hair brushing against my cheek. I smiled, hugging her back, but inside I felt like I was touching a stranger. "I'll help everyone prepare," she said, her eyes sparkling. "We'll make it a night to remember." A night to remember indeed, but not in the way she thought. I nodded, saying I was looking forward to it, but in my mind I was counting down the hours to that fateful night. Diego dropped by a few times before the party, as usual, with his smug smile and attitude that treated me like a servant. "A party, huh? Sounds cool, bro," he said, slapping my shoulder hard enough that I had to restrain myself from shoving his hand away. "Make sure you get some good liquor, all right? I don't drink cheap stuff." I nodded, forcing a smile. Every time I looked at him, I had to remind myself to stay calm, to keep playing this role until the end. The day of the party arrived, and Pennsylvania was cloaked in a thin layer of fog, as if nature itself was warning me of what was to come. My house was decorated simply but warmly, with flickering candles on the dining table and the daisies Isabella had brought. On the surface, it looked like a cozy family evening, but I knew that beneath the gentle glow lay a sinister plot. I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom, adjusting my dress shirt, taking a deep breath. The face staring back at me was no longer the Lorenzo Carver who craved love. It was a man with cold, determined eyes, ready to face his betrayers. When I stepped into the living room, Raphael and Maria were already there. Maria wore a green silk dress, her usual gentle smile plastered on. But I was no longer fooled. Raphael, in an old suit, stood by the dining table. "Check this out." "Good wine, Lorenzo," he said, his voice unusually enthusiastic, waving the bottle. "I picked it specially for tonight." I nodded, smiling, but my heart pounded. That was the wine. The wine Diego had mentioned in the video. Diego arrived late, as always, dressed in a trendy outfit with his smug grin. "Looking fancy, bro," he said, scanning the room. "Didn't know you had it in you to throw a party." I laughed, responding lightly, but in my head I was counting every second, every minute. Isabella came in shortly after, stunning in a fitted white dress, her brown hair cascading loosely. She hugged me, whispering, "Tonight's going to be special, love." I nodded, hugging her back, but my grip was tighter than usual. Special indeed, but not in the way she thought. The party began, and on the surface everything seemed perfect. Maria shared stories of her youth, her gentle laughter ringing like wind chimes. Rafael, despite his stern demeanor, chimed in with tales from his days at the lumberyard. Diego, as usual, took center stage, regaling everyone with stories of his lavish trips and wealthy friends. Isabella sat beside me, her hand resting lightly on mine, smiling softly. But I was no longer swept up in their performance. I looked at them, the people I once called family, the woman I loved, and saw only strangers waiting for their chance to kill me. Then the moment arrived. Rafael stood holding the bottle of red wine, a strange glint in his eyes. "Let me pour for everyone," he said, his voice unexpectedly kind. My heart raced as he approached me, tilting the bottle over my glass. The red wine shimmered under the candlelight like blood pooling in the glass. "To your lifelong happiness, Lorenzo," he said, setting the glass in front of me. It was the first time in my life he had done something kind for me, and the irony made me want to laugh. I knew the wine contained antifreeze, the death they had planned for me. Maria raised her glass, her smile gentle but sharp. "Drink, my son, for luck and lifelong happiness," she said, her eyes locked on me. Diego, sitting across from me, smirked, his glass glinting in his hand. "Drink up, bro," he said, his tone encouraging. Isabella squeezed my hand, gently urging, "Let's drink together, love." To us. Every eye in the room was on me, waiting, tense like wolves circling their prey. I raised my glass, smiling, but inside I was counting each breath. "To everyone," I said, my voice steady, clinking my glass with theirs. The sound of crystal rang through the air, crisp like a warning. I pretended to bring the glass to my lips but didn't drink. I watched them through the corner of my eye. Rafael sipped, but I saw he was faking it, his glass barely emptying. Maria did the same, her lips touching the rim but not drinking. Diego and Isabella followed suit, their smiles stiff, their eyes flickering with tension. No one drank, because they knew the wine was poisoned. I set my glass down, smiling as if nothing was amiss. "Great wine," I said lightly. "Thanks for picking it, Dad." Rafael nodded, but I saw his hand tighten around his glass as if hiding his unease. Isabella gripped my hand harder, but her touch felt cold. The atmosphere in the living room remained falsely cheerful, but I could feel the tension creeping in. I kept my face calm, a gentle smile on my lips, but inside I was counting every second. I knew the moment was near. Before the party began, I had contacted my lawyer, James, sending him a copy of the video from the hidden camera. I told him tonight was when they would act, and I needed him to be ready. I didn't know exactly when he and the police would arrive, but I trusted they wouldn't let me face death alone. Then, like a thunderclap in a clear sky, a rapid knock at the door interrupted Diego's story. Everyone flinched, their eyes turning toward the entrance. Rafael stood, his face hardening, though he tried to maintain a facade of calm. "I'll get it," he said, his voice stiff. Maria gripped her napkin tightly, her smile vanishing, replaced by a pale, anxious expression. Diego stopped talking, his hand frozen mid-air, his wine glass trembling. Isabella let go of my hand, her eyes flashing with panic before she masked it with a forced smile. I sat still, my heart pounding, but not from fear. It was the pulse of anticipation. Rafael opened the door and I heard the low, clear voice of James, my lawyer. "Mr. Rafael Carver? We have a search warrant from the district court." He stepped inside, followed by 2 uniformed police officers, their faces stern. One held a document, presenting it to Rafael. The air in the room instantly grew heavy as if a veil of pretense had been torn apart. Maria let out a small gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Diego sat upright, his wine glass slipping from his hand, the red liquid spilling across the table like blood. Isabella clutched her dress, her eyes darting toward me, but I didn't look back. I no longer wanted to meet those deceitful eyes. James stepped into the living room, his gaze sharp but composed. He placed his laptop on the dining table amidst the plates of food and wine glasses. "I think everyone should see this," he said, his voice steady but authoritative. Raphael tried to speak. "What's going on here? You have no right to barge into my son's house." But his voice trembled, lacking any real authority. The officer beside him raised a hand to signal silence. "Let us do our job, Mr. Carver." James opened the laptop and the video from the hidden camera began to play. The sound filled the silent room, clear and chilling. It was my parents admitting I was adopted, their conversation with Diego and Isabella plotting to defraud me of money, and coldly planning to poison me with antifreeze in my wine tonight to seize the house I lived in. Each word, each sentence cut through the air like a knife. I sat there, watching the faces of those I once called family. Raphael froze, his eyes glued to the screen as if unable to believe his own words were being replayed. Maria burst into tears, but I knew they weren't tears of remorse. She trembled, muttering, No, it's a misunderstanding. We were just joking." Diego was sweating, his handsome face now contorted with panic. "What is this? Who staged this video?" he stammered, but his voice was weak, as if even he didn't believe his own denial. Isabella, sitting beside me, sat motionless like a statue. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tightly, her eyes avoiding mine. James stopped the video, his gaze sweeping over everyone in the room. "This is no joke," he said, his voice cold as steel. "This is evidence of a conspiracy to commit murder and steal property." One of the officers stepped to the table, carefully picking up the bottle of red wine, the one Raphael had poured for me, and placed it in an evidence bag. "We'll have this tested for toxins," the officer said, his voice calm but commanding. "If antifreeze is found, you'll face serious charges." Raphael jumped up, his voice nearly a shout. "This is absurd! We didn't do anything. Lorenzo, are you just going to sit there and let them frame your parents?" I looked at him, my eyes cold, devoid of the naivety I once had. "Parents?" I said, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. "You said I'm not your blood. So what am I to you now?" Raphael faltered, his face paling, unable to find words. Maria covered her face, sobbing loudly, but I knew it was an act. "Lorenzo, how could you do this to your mother? I raised you," she cried, her voice trembling. But I was no longer swayed. I looked at her, my gaze unflinching. "Raised me so you could kill me for money? Is that what you call love?" She fell silent, tears still falling, but with no words left to defend herself. Diego, his smugness gone, was now just a panicked figure. "Lorenzo, you've got it all wrong. I was just joking like always, you know me," he said, his voice breaking, but his eyes betrayed him. Isabella finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Lorenzo, you don't believe that video. I'd never want to hurt you." But she couldn't meet my eyes, her gaze shifting away. The second officer stepped forward, pulling out another document. "Raphael Carver, Maria Carver, Diego Carver, and Isabella Torres, you are under temporary arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and theft of property," he said, his voice clear and resonant in the now tomb-like room. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court." Raphael struggled as the police cuffed him, still muttering that it was all a misunderstanding. Maria cried louder, but no one was moved. Diego and Isabella, now mere trembling shadows, were led out of my house, their eyes filled with panic and regret, not for hurting me, but for being caught. I sat there, my gaze cold, watching the celebratory party collapse. The candles still burned, but their light now only illuminated the true faces of the Carver family, a family built on lies and greed. I didn't feel triumphant, only a cold emptiness in my heart. But I knew I had done the right thing. After a moment of silence, I stood, blew out the candles and let the room sink into darkness. I grabbed my car keys, not looking back, and drove off into the thick Pennsylvania fog. My mind was blank, but my heart was heavy. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed a place to breathe, a place untainted by betrayal. And then, as if by instinct, I drove to Uncle Samuel's house, the only family member who had ever truly cared about me. Uncle Samuel, Raphael's younger brother, lived in a small house a few miles outside of town, nestled beside a quiet stream. Since I was a child, he was the only one in the family who made me feel seen. When Raphael criticized me for not being good enough, when Maria poured all her affection into Diego, Uncle Samuel was the one who took me fishing, taught me to fix a bike, and shared stories of his youthful road trips. "You're a smart kid, Lorenzo," he once said, placing a hand on my shoulder, his eyes warm. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those simple words were a faint light in my dark childhood. When I knocked on his door, it was late. He opened it, his silver hair disheveled, his kind eyes narrowing with concern when he saw me. "Lorenzo, what are you doing here in the middle of the night?" he asked, his voice filled with worry. I stood under the dim porch light, my throat suddenly tight. I didn't know where to begin, but I knew if there was anyone in the world I could trust, it was Uncle Samuel. I stepped inside and sat in his worn-out armchair in the living room. The scent of pine and coffee lingered in the air, bringing a sense of familiarity I hadn't felt in a long time. I told him everything, from Raphael's sudden call, how they moved into my house, the deliberate sabotage of the cameras, and the video that exposed their horrifying plot. I spoke of the poisoned wine, of how Isabella, the woman I loved, had betrayed me, and of the moment the police stormed in, tearing away the Carver family's mask. I spoke evenly, as if recounting someone else's story, but tears fell silently. Not from weakness, but from the realization of how much I had lost. Uncle Samuel sat across from me, his thin hands clasped tightly, his eyes heavy. When I finished, he sat in silence, as if unable to believe what he'd heard. "Lorenzo," he whispered, his voice choked. "I never thought Raphael and Maria could sink this low. So greedy, so cruel." He shook his head, his eyes red, as if he too felt the sting of betrayal. "I'm sorry, nephew. I should have done something, said something long ago." I looked at him, feeling a part of my heart soothed, yet another part still aching. "You knew something, didn't you?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "About me not being their real son." Samuel froze, his eyes passing over me, filled with pain and hesitation. After a long moment, he sighed, placing a warm, steady hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone, Lorenzo," he said firmly. "To me, you've always been family." Then he spoke, his voice slow, each word heavy. He had known I was adopted since I was a child. Raphael and Maria took me in when I was just a few months old, but they never treated me as their own. "I wanted to tell you so many times," he said, his gaze distant. "But I was afraid the truth would hurt you. I wanted you to grow up like any other kid, not feeling different or singled out. I was wrong, Lorenzo. I should have protected you better." I sat there, listening, feeling both pain and healing. Pain because the truth about my adoption was confirmed once more, like a final knife tearing through the illusions I once held about family. But healing because of Samuel's genuine care. Through all the years of Raphael's contempt, Maria's indifference, and Diego's mockery, Samuel was the only one who looked at me with unconditional love. "Uncle," I said, my voice catching, "I don't blame you. I'm just glad I still have you." He gripped my hand tightly, his eyes shining despite the sorrow. "You're strong, Lorenzo," he said. "You've overcome so much, and I'm proud of you. No matter what Raphael and Maria did, no matter the truth, you're family to me." Those simple, heartfelt words were like a ray of light piercing the thick darkness in my heart. For the first time in days, I felt I wasn't alone. I still had a true connection, a family member who didn't need blood to love me. Our conversation stretched into the night. Samuel brewed coffee, and we sat there talking about the old days, The fishing trips, the times he taught me to tie a fishing knot, the secret ice cream runs when Raphael scolded me for breaking a vase. Those small memories were a balm to my soul. I realized that despite the Carver family's betrayal, I still had Samuel, and that was enough to make me feel stronger. When I left his house, dawn was breaking. The first light of morning peeked over the Pennsylvania hills, casting a golden glow on the road ahead. I drove home, feeling as if a part of the weight in my heart had lifted. I was still hurt, still wounded, but I no longer felt lost. Samuel had given me an anchor, a reason to believe there was still good in the world. Weeks later, the case was brought to trial. Raphael, Maria, Diego, and Isabella were detained, awaiting prosecution for conspiracy to commit murder and theft of property. My lawyer, James, called to tell me they wanted to meet me at the detention center. Part of me wanted to refuse to cut ties completely, but another part, the part still yearning for even the smallest explanation, compelled me to agree. I needed to look into their eyes, hear their words, not to forgive, but to affirm that I was right to fight to protect myself. The detention center was on the outskirts of town, a grim gray building with cold concrete walls and barbed wire fences. I entered the visitation room, the air heavy with the smell of disinfectant and the clanging of locks. A guard led me to a small room where a steel table was bolted to the floor, flanked by rigid plastic chairs. A thick glass pane separated me from the other side, where Raphael, Maria, and Diego would appear. I sat down, hands clasped, my gaze steady despite my racing heart. Raphael came first, his tall, gaunt figure now haggard in an orange prison jumpsuit. He sat, his eyes still carrying that stern look, but the arrogance was gone. "Lorenzo," he began, his voice hoarse, "you don't understand. It was about debts. I had no choice. Life, fate, it pushed me to a corner." I stared at him, unblinking, silent. Debts? Fate. Those excuses sounded cheap. He had chosen to kill me, to sacrifice me for his greed, and now he called it fate? I shook my head, lips pressed tight, refusing to let emotion sway me. Maria came next, her eyes swollen and red, her silver hair disheveled. She covered her face, sobbing as she sat. "Lorenzo, my son," she said, her voice trembling, "how could you do this to your family? I raised you, gave you everything, and you betrayed us." Her words cut like a knife, not because they hurt, but because I was stunned by her audacity. Betrayed. She called my fight to save my life betrayal? I looked straight into her eyes, my voice cold. "The motherly love you speak of, was that planning to take my life for money?" Maria froze, tears still falling, but she had no response. She knew there was nothing left to say. Diego was the last. He walked in, no longer with his smug smile or polished appearance. His eyes were red, but I saw a flicker of resentment still lingering. "Lorenzo, I'm sorry," he said, his voice faltering. "I didn't want things to go this far. But you always had everything. The house, the job, Isabella. I just wanted things to be fair." Fair? I nearly laughed at the irony. I had worked tirelessly, saved every penny to buy that house while Diego partied and lived off our parents. I looked at him, my gaze unwavering. "Fairness isn't stealing someone's life, Diego," I said, my voice steady. "You chose their side and now you pay the price." I stood, feeling as if a weight had been lifted from my chest. I had heard enough. Their excuses, tears, and accusations couldn't change the truth. "I have nothing left to forgive," I said, looking from Raphael to Maria to Diego. "You were never my family. Never will be." I turned away, unwilling to look at them for another second. The guard opened the door and I stepped out, but then paused, turning to him. "I want to see Isabella, alone," I said, my voice low but firm. The guard nodded, leading me to another room. I sat, waiting, my heart pounding. Not because I expected an explanation, but because I wanted to face her, the woman I once loved, who made me believe I was worthy of love. I wanted to hear her speak just once to close this chapter completely. But after a few minutes, the guard returned, his eyes tinged with sympathy. Ms. Isabella Torres refuses to see you, he said. She said, she's too ashamed to face you. I stood there, silent, feeling as if a cold wind had swept through me. Ashamed? Too ashamed to face me? Those words echoed in my mind, and I realized they were her final confession. She didn't need to say anything more. Her silence, her avoidance spoke volumes, that she knew she was wrong, that she couldn't justify her betrayal. I nodded to the guard, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. "Thank you," I said, my voice even. As I walked out of the detention center, the midday sun shone down, warm but not enough to thaw the emptiness in my heart. I stood by my car, looking up at the clear Pennsylvania sky, feeling a strange mix of bitterness and relief. Bitterness because those I once called family, those I loved, had betrayed me so cruelly. Relief because I had severed the ties binding me to them, because I knew I no longer had to live in their lies. Isabella's silence was the final period, and I, Lorenzo Carver, was now free to start anew. In the weeks that followed, the Carver family case became the talk of our small town. The news spread like wildfire through dry grass. Family plotted to kill adopted son for property. The headlines in local newspapers left me numb. I didn't read the full articles, unwilling to immerse myself in the gossip of the town. But I knew everyone was shocked, unable to believe that Rafael, Maria, Diego, and Isabella, once seen as an ordinary family, could sink to such depravity. The preliminary hearing unfolded quickly, like a storm sweeping through and leaving silence in its wake. I sat in the back row, my eyes fixed on the people who were once part of my life. Rafael, his stern features now more haggard, bowed his head at the defendant's stand. Maria, her silver hair disheveled, no longer maintained her feigned gentleness, now just a trembling woman facing judgment. Diego, stripped of his smug smile, avoided eye contact as if trying to escape the truth. Isabella, still beautiful but pale, sat silently, unable to lift her face. My lawyer, James, presented the evidence with calm precision. The video from the hidden camera was played, each cruel word from Rafael, Maria, Diego, and Isabella echoing through the courtroom, clear and undeniable. The bottle of red wine, after forensic analysis, was confirmed to contain antifreeze, a dose lethal enough to kill within hours. The prosecutor described their plot with a cold voice. This was not just greed, but calculated cruelty, targeting an innocent man simply because he was not their blood. Rafael tried to justify himself, repeating his story of debts and fate, but his voice was weak, unconvincing to anyone. Maria sobbed, but no one believed her tears anymore. Diego and Isabella remained silent, their eyes downcast as if the weight of the truth had crushed their ability to resist. When the judge delivered the verdict, harsh sentences for conspiracy to commit murder and theft of property, the courtroom fell silent. Rafael, Maria, Diego, and Isabella were led away, their figures disappearing behind a steel door. The local community was stunned. Neighbors, co-workers at the coal mine, even people I barely knew looked at me with a mix of pity and astonishment. "Lorenzo, how did you get through this?" a colleague asked during a lunch break. I shrugged, offering a faint smile. "I just had to keep living," I said, but inside I knew that wasn't the full truth. I survived not because I was strong, but because I had no other choice. I returned to my house at the end of Cedar Lane, but it no longer felt like the sanctuary I once cherished. Every corner, every chair reminded me of the days I lived in deception. The dining table where Rafael poured the poisoned wine. The sofa where Diego lounged and treated me like a servant. The garden where Isabella planted daisies and said she loved me. They were all like scars. But I didn't want to abandon this house. It was my achievement, proof of the years I fought to build my life. I decided to transform it, to make it mine again. I began renovating the house as a way to erase the painful memories. I repainted the walls, choosing a soft blue to replace the cold white. I swapped the old sofa for a new, simple but warm one, adorned with vibrant yellow cushions. The garden was tended to again, the daisies replaced with lavender that released a gentle fragrance each morning. I installed larger windows, letting sunlight flood every corner. My work at the coal mine remained my anchor. The long days in the tunnels with coal dust clinging to my clothes and sweat soaking my skin kept me focused. I was no longer the Lorenzo Carver who craved love. I was a man who knew his worth, who understood that I didn't need anyone's validation to live well. My colleagues began to see me differently, no longer with pity but with respect. "You're stronger than we thought, Lorenzo," a friend said. I smiled, but inside I knew I was slowly rediscovering myself. Uncle Samuel became my steadfast emotional support. On weekends, I drove to his house, sitting by the small stream, listening to his old stories or simply soaking in the silence, letting the sound of flowing water soothe my soul. "You've done it all. A house, a job, a decent life. That's something Rafael and Maria never understood," he said. I nodded, feeling my heart warm. I started meeting new people, kind neighbors, colleagues who invited me for a beer after work. I joined a hiking club, exploring the lush green hills of Pennsylvania, where I found the peace I thought I'd lost. I wasn't rushing to find new love, but I knew my heart was still capable of opening up once time had healed the scars. Looking back on my journey, I realized that my life, though filled with pain, has taught me lessons no classroom could ever impart. The days spent living in the deceit of the Carver family, the moments I faced a poisoned glass of wine, and the instances when I stood up to protect my life, all of these have shaped me into the man I am today. I want to share my story, not to dwell on the pain, but to convey a message, lessons, and advice that I paid for with blood and tears. First, I learned that family is not always defined by blood. I once called Rafael and Maria my parents, saw Diego as my brother, and believed Isabella would be my lifelong partner. But they, the ones I thought were my blood, were ready to take my life for greed and selfishness. Meanwhile, Uncle Samuel, who needed no blood tie to love me, was the one who sheltered me, the light guiding me through the darkness. True family lies not in the blood running through your veins, but in actions, in protection, and in sincerity. Samuel proved that by standing by me, by seeing me as a son, even though I didn't carry his blood. The betrayal by the Carver family taught me a harsh lesson. Greed, debt, and selfishness can turn the people you love most into your most dangerous enemies. They weren't monsters from fairy tales. They were ordinary people led astray by their own greed. This lesson was painful, but it made me realize a truth. When you're in a toxic relationship, whether with family or a lover, sometimes you must have the courage to cut ties. I did that not out of revenge, but to protect myself. Letting go of toxic relationships isn't failure. It's liberation. I also learned that trust is precious, but it shouldn't be blind. I once trusted Isabella unconditionally, believed her love was real. I thought Rafael and Maria, despite their coldness, were still family. Now I understand that vigilance is the strongest weapon. Don't ignore feelings of unease, don't dismiss strange signs. If I hadn't checked the cameras, hadn't quietly gathered evidence, I might not be here telling this story. Despite being betrayed by those I called family, I found light in the darkness. Uncle Samuel, with his unconditional care, reminded me that true family doesn't require blood. The kind neighbors, the colleagues willing to listen, and the new friends in the hiking club, they are proof that bonds can be built on sincerity. I lost a false family, but I found genuine relationships, people who don't need me to prove my worth to love me. My story isn't one of triumphant victory. It's a story of loss, of betrayal, but also of freedom. Sometimes loss is the only path to finding yourself. I lost those I once loved, but I found inner strength, clarity, and sincere new connections. I'm no longer the Lorenzo Carver craving love, no longer the adopted son trying to please a family that never saw me as theirs. I'm Lorenzo Carver, a man who has overcome darkness, built a true home, and is living a life that belongs to him. Each morning I stand at my window watching sunlight filter through the lavender in the garden, and I know I've found my light. not the artificial glow of candles from that horrific party night, but the light from my own heart. A heart once broken but now learning to beat again, stronger than ever. If you're reading this story, I have one thing to say. Trust in yourself. Stay vigilant and don't fear walking alone. Because sometimes in the darkness of betrayal, you'll find your own light. 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 Light.